Hi, everybody. This is the Dr. Debunk weekly podcast show. On this show, I'm going to be debunking the medical myths, garbage, and crap that's spread by doctors and other health professionals. Dr. Debunk is the medical truth teller. Today's podcast is going to be about the dirty little secrets in medicine, or the dirty little secrets of doctors. As I mentioned, dirty little secrets are just the things in medicine that we do wrong as doctors, that we are in denial about, or it's just things that have come into play that we really don't want to analyze. Until somebody confronts us, we're like everyone else. Sometimes we believe things in medicine that just aren't true. And so, as I mentioned before, there's really big, dirty little secrets in medicine, and then there's really small, dirty little secrets. And again, these dirty little secrets are mostly things that just happen as a byproduct of medical advances. In other words, as medicine started to evolve in the 20th century, unfortunate truths simultaneously begin to happen as we learn more and more. What I mean is, medicine is an ever-evolving subject. That means what we doctors believe is true today, it's not going to be true 30 years from now, because science is evolving. We thought the scientific truth, say, about hormones in the 1970s was one thing, but then we've learned since then that science wasn't really correct. To further complicate it, it's a subject-by-subject truth. Some areas of medicine change very slowly. Others change more rapidly. But we doctors are arrogant SOBs. I mean, we believe that what we know today is absolute. And if you speak against that absolute belief, you'll be burned at the stake. We're slow to change in medicine. We're in denial a long time about the need for change. And here's why. Because by definition, it means that what we were doing for the previous 20 or 30 years wasn't correct, because we have more data now. And so that means we were doing minimal, moderate, or severe harm to patients because it seemed correct to us. But now, hindsight, or what I like to say, buttsight, we're looking back and we realized, because at that time we didn't have enough knowledge. But then later we learned some new truth about how the body works, the physiology of the body, the function. And so then we realized, no, we have to do it differently. We weren't doing it right. But what we do is we just start doing it the right way and pretend like the last 30 years didn't happen. And why is that? Well, because we are the super smart, wonderful, glow-in-the-dark doctors that walk on water. And oh, by the way, when we go to the bathroom, sherbet comes out of our butts, in case you didn't know that. Anyway, it's this mindset like that keeps us from embracing the truth. And it's not pleasant to realize and acknowledge that we could have significantly hurt people. Now, if you don't think this is true, if this sounds like far-fetched, let's do some examples. How many women do you think had their uteruses removed from 1960 to, say, 1980? And how many do you think of those uteruses really needed to be removed? Tens of thousands of women had their uteruses removed for no good reason. Why? Because this is what OB/GYN doctors would say. Well, you're in menopause now, you don't need it. Or you're getting close to menopause. And so back then, if a woman came in to a GYN and said one symptom that would justify a hysterectomy, bye-bye uterus, they're chopping it out. I mean, just a little heavy extra bleeding on a menstrual cycle. Get rid of it, you don't need it. Tons and tons of women, sometimes in their 30s, not even close to menopause, had this done. I mean, this is history, folks. Back then, if you're a female, if you had any symptoms that had to do with your reproductive organs, the GYN surgeons were waiting to pounce with a knife. I mean, that thinking is absolutely nuts. To remove an entire organ system just because we believed that since women don't have periods anymore, you don't need it? It's nuts. Or because a younger woman said she was beginning to have extra bleeding over than what's considered normal, we're going to chop out your uterus? That's crazy. And part of the justification doctors made up, and we made it up out of thin air, was a belief that, well, women's ovaries don't make hormones anymore once she hits menopause, so just chop them out. I mean, because they didn't just take the uterus, folks. They took the ovaries too. But actually, there is no scientific evidence anywhere in the history of medicine that show that ovaries stop making estrogen in menopause. They still make estrogen and progesterone. They don't make eggs anymore, we know that, and that's why you don't, make babies. But that doesn't mean the ovaries don't work. I mean, this belief came for reasons, it's a long, twisted story, but there's no evidence to suggest. I mean, why would they stop? Estrogen and progesterone are vital for women to be women. Again, it's moronic, stupid thinking that is just unacceptable. If this isn't bad enough, it gets worse. Here's how it gets worse. So when women back then were getting their unnecessary hysterectomy, thousands of appendixes were removed along with it. The logic was, well, you don't need the appendix anyway, and since we're in there, let's just go get rid of it. You won't get appendicitis later. Here's the problem with that. A ton of secondary complications from the appendix removal would occur. It's nuts. And then, when we started to see catastrophic low estrogen and progesterone deficiency syndromes begin to surface, and women's bladders began to fall out of their vagina because the uterus holds up the bladder, doctors began to realize, oh, we better slow down this insane chopping because the uterus is critical to hold the bladder in place. Ask any woman out there if she wants her bladder to fall out of her vagina when she's 52 years old. So when all these complications and more created an epidemic problem, finally, doctors couldn't ignore it and the insane chopping stopped. I saw this. I became a doctor in 1985. I saw the catastrophic events, and I still see it. But the surgeons didn't worry because now the doctors can do another surgery called a bladder suspension surgery to keep the bladder from falling out of the vagina. So now they got to do another surgery to fix the problems from the first surgery. And to make that even worse, I think it took them 10 years or more just to figure out how to do a correct bladder suspension surgery. So I can line up the women for you, my patients, that had to have it redone because they didn't know how to do it. It's nuts. So anyway, this great money-making system for GYN surgeons all came to an end. I would venture to say that if we could go back and reveal the reasons doctors used to remove all these uteruses, and these reasons were made public, criminal charges would be assessed against many hundreds of GYN doctors. It was criminal assault against tens of thousands of women. I'm not exaggerating. I trained in the 80s. I saw this. I saw this blatant disregard and abuse of the trust patients put in their doctors. The unfortunate reality is this. It's easier for doctors, us doctors, to just stay in denial than to face reality, which is why Dr. Debunk has come, because I can't stand it anymore. Okay, so let's talk about another example. There's so many. How many years do you have? But the first doctor that proposed that stomach ulcers were caused by a germ was burned at the stake. I mean, they said, this guy's crazy. I mean, obviously they didn't literally burn him, but everybody said he was nuts. But guess what? Now, 20 years later, we know that a minimum of 30% of ulcers are caused by a germ called H. pylori. And so when non-mainstream doctors who thought, ooh, this is interesting, started to investigate this witch doctor's claim about a germ causing ulcers, oh, it all turned out to be true. Not for all ulcers, like it's 30% or more. But over time, the evidence became undeniable and they didn't burn the witch doctor. And now we have a completely different way to treat ulcers when you're diagnosed with one. There's so many more examples that if I talked about it, I'd get too depressed and I'd have to go on large doses of Prozac. So I just can't do it. Anyway, I set that all up because it's more than just medicines and surgery. And that's kind of the point of this doctor's dirty little secrets in medicine today. Here's the question. Why are so many Americans epidemically addicted to caffeine? Okay, now a word from our sponsors. Hi everyone, it's the cold and flu season again, and this year's pretty nasty. Well, do you know what the best cold and flu remedy is? Well, it's a remedy that would be natural, strong, kills viruses, and has some science to show that it really works. Well, that's KSK Cold Spray. KSK Cold Spray is an all-natural, germicidal spray that eliminates cold and flu symptoms in 24 to 48 hours. I proved it in a study of 200 patients, and now we've probably had 700 people that have used the spray. Every year it's curing hundreds of my patients. So don't be miserable anymore. Go to kskcold.com, that's kskcold.com, and you'll love what you read. I'm Dr. Debunk, the medical truth teller. Welcome back. Okay, as you remember, I was just asking a question. Why are so many Americans epidemically addicted to caffeine? I mean, when I grew up, when I was a teenager in the late 60s and then 70s, nobody was addicted to caffeine. There were no energy drinks. I mean, the only Americans who drink coffee were Americans that wanted to pretend to be little French people with their little coffee cups. I mean, it just wasn't used. Well, what's happened is radical changes have occurred in our society over the last 40 years. So there's two reasons why people are epidemically addicted to caffeine. One, thyroid deficiency is now epidemic in America. By 35 years old, 50% of women need thyroid. By 40, 45, over 50% of men need it. That's the first reason, low thyroid. And secondly, sleep deprivation. We're all sleep deprived. And see, caffeine is fake thyroid. In medicine today, physicians like me realize there's a huge problem with hormone replacement therapies. So we kind of start specializing in it. Not the way endocrinologists do, but in the way of optimizing patients' health. I mean, endocrinologists are trying to find disease, low thyroid disease, low testosterone disease, low estrogen disease. But physicians like me want to make people optimal in hormone levels. So we practice the exact opposite of standardized medicine. We're trying to make people optimally healthy instead of just the early detection of disease. I mean, early detection isn't bad. Don't get me wrong. Early detection is just that. We're trying to do tests, and honestly, most medical testing is designed for the early detection of disease, which is important. You want to find it early. And so it's not bad, but it's just miles away from optimal health. But medicine has no knowledge or study of optimal health. So how it goes like this? It goes like this. Standard medicine says that the blood level of a hormone equals the body level of a hormone, or the tissue level of a hormone equals the blood level of a hormone. This is absolutely false. There is no medical science that's ever been done since blood tests came online in the 1970s. There's no evidence to ever show that the tissue level of a hormone correlates with the blood level. It's a fictional belief we have as doctors that came about simply because of the science in the 1970s. In the science, which I won't explain, we believed that hormones passively diffused from the blood to the tissues. We know that's not true. It's active transport. I won't explain that. It just means that if that was true, then the blood level would equal the body level. But it's not true. We know it's not true. You can look at any medical textbook, any physiologic textbook. But even though the science has changed, we haven't changed as doctors. So a regular doctor, to determine if your thyroid level or estrogen level or progesterone level, whatever, a regular doctor will draw your blood, check your thyroid hormone, and generally will tell you it's fine. And yet you could be having major low thyroid symptoms that would have no other reason for those symptoms, and he'll tell you you're fine. So an example would be if you're moderately low in thyroid, moderate degree of deficiency, you'd be tired every afternoon. You'd wake up tired sometimes, even if you sleep well, 8 hours or more. You're gaining weight for no reason. You feel mentally fuzzy at times. You could have low body temperature, constipation. There's many more symptoms. Look them up. Now, I can tell you with 100% certainty, if you're not broken with disease, these symptoms are low thyroid by definition. The only other possibility to feel that way is sleep deprivation. And if you're under 50, it's really hard to have sleep deprivation. Nothing else can cause this. And how can we prove it? All I have to do is give you the medium strength thyroid hormone that we use, and it will cure you in 3 to 6 weeks. It's over 80% successful. Every time I have been doing it this way for 15 years, I have almost 1,000 thyroid patients between my two offices. So here is the Dr. Debunk truth. Low thyroid is epidemic in America today. As I mentioned before, 35-year-old for women, 40-year-old for men, 50%. And by 55 years old, 90% of Americans would benefit from 2 to 4 days a week of supplementing with the correct form of thyroid. It's just epidemic. And if you replaced it, you would then feel like your energy levels were optimal. And this epidemic is getting into younger and younger age populations with each successive generation. I have gaggles of women in their 30s that take it 3 days a week, and they're perfect. You just have to see a doctor that knows how to do it, because we're still doing the same dopey blood tests. So what we do, just to tell you, blood tests are important to know how much thyroid to give people. It's part of the treatment process, but it's not part of the diagnostic process. You can't diagnose hormone deficiencies with blood tests. You can diagnose hormone disease, low disease, high disease, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, not deficiency. So doctors that have success in hormone replacement therapy practice this kind of medicine. We use the patient's symptoms to diagnose deficiencies, and we use blood tests and your symptoms to help give us correct hormone amounts. How much do we give? We just don't use a blood test to diagnose, because the truth, you can't diagnose a deficiency of anything. Hormones, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, it doesn't work. A blood test only represents an extreme deficiency, which we call disease. And there's so much more to this, but it's beyond the scope of this discussion. Here's the problem. You can spend your whole adult life in one of the 4 deficiency states, minimal, mild, moderate, severe, and your blood tests will be normal. Only when it gets down to extreme will it show up in the blood. I think I'm going to do a little more actually on the history of this, because this goes against mainstream medicine so strongly that I want to give you more evidence, because that's really what this Dirty Little Secrets is about. And that is that the blood level of a hormone doesn't correlate with the tissue level. And it's just a factoid doctors believe. So here's the history. We started treating thyroid in 1910. It's probably the oldest prescription medical treatment protocol we have, because that's when they realized you could take desiccated thyroid, which is thyroid from pigs and cows. You could purify it out the best you could and give it to humans, and they would feel better. Their symptoms of low thyroid would go away. So from 1910 until 1970, we gave this medium strength thyroid, which again is called desiccated thyroid. And most of you know this is called Armour thyroid, but Armour is a brand name of a particular company, but it's really desiccated thyroid. And so desiccated thyroid was successfully given for 60 years because we didn't have blood tests, but we treated symptoms. Now, some problems occurred. This is true. But the problems occurred with desiccated thyroid, they occurred because of what I call lazy doctoritis. We had lazy doctors. And what that means is people would get too much thyroid, desiccated thyroid, because the doctor was too lazy to ask the questions to make sure their patients weren't getting too much. I mean, we didn't have blood tests to analyze it. We just saw results. But after a while, people kind of settled into a dosage that they took every day, and they seemed fine. But what happened was it was too much. And so we couldn't be bothered to keep checking with specific symptom questions to see that they were getting things like an elevated heart rate at rest. So what happened was, back then, people would get a little too much thyroid. It would finally build up in the tissues. I mean, the body gets rid of extra hormones if it doesn't need them, but still, too much will get in the tissues. And thyroid has an effect on heart rate. And so when you get too much, you'll start to have an elevated heart rate at rest. Now, think about that. If you have an elevated heart rate at rest, it's going to be a lot easier for you to maintain a weight. Because if your heart rate is beating 25%, 30%, 40% faster, that takes a lot of energy. So what do you think women did with that? They did nothing. They didn't really notice the heart rate was 95, and they just had an easier time at staying skinny. So did they see doctors? Did they get treated? No. And so literally, if you stay at a resting heart rate of 90 for 5 years or 6 years or 10 years, it could potentially cause a problem. And that's what happened. There's some other minor things, but really the heart rate thing is the big deal. But what happened was, as we began to identify this kind of drove the development of blood tests, and then this problem allowed the current medical treatment protocols to be ushered in. Because as blood tests became commonplace in the 1970s and early 80s, when I became a doctor, we started treating the patient based on what the blood test said, and we also started treating it with this weak form of thyroid called levothyroxine. I can't really get into the difference between the weak, medium, and strong, but basically the weak thyroid, levothyroxine, correlated really good with blood levels. It really didn't correlate with your symptoms, but it would correlate with your blood. So it then became possible to just draw your blood, and the levels would correlate with the levothyroxine level, but it was irrespective of your symptoms. Well, this was a wet dream come true for doctors. Because what happened was, we found a way to treat your blood and not your body. We didn't even have to talk to you. So the doctor could adjust the thyroid dose and make the blood level perfect, but it really had no or minimal effect on your symptoms. But the doctor didn't care because we had this absolute test that determined reality. And so what you said meant nothing. Because the blood levels of thyroid don't correlate with the body level with anywhere near where your symptoms come from. So let me say that again. Your symptoms of optimal energy or your symptoms of being tiredness come from your body level of a hormone, your tissue level, not the blood level. If your blood level is high or low in thyroid, it doesn't make you feel energetic or tired. It doesn't do anything. The blood is just the highway. Thyroid doesn't function in the blood. It functions in the tissues. So the doctor could fix your blood level of your thyroid, but your symptoms wouldn't change. But why would the doctor care? Because we made up a factoid, a false belief, that said if the blood test says you're normal, you're normal. And so if you're fat and tired and mentally fatigued and below body temperature, it's something else. But the doctor would have no answer for you of what that else was. What is something else? because now we doctors have this neat little blood test that we could adjust up or down by how much hormone we gave you. So it made the doctors feel really good, but not the patients. And we could also, here's the kicker, here's the truth, the Dr. Debunk truth, here's the real kicker, we could defend ourselves in court. It doesn't matter if I blew up your body. If we can show in court that the blood test was normal, then that's so compelling. The defense of blood tests, the defense of any testing is so strong. Because we had convinced the whole world, not just us, that the blood test is magic. That the magic blood test is all powerful. And you patients too believe that. Because we've convinced you of it. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, I'm not going to talk about that. It's another whole Dr. Debunk truth about the magic power of testing that makes you feel okay. That if the magic test says you're okay, you really are okay. And if the test says you're okay, then you don't believe you're accelerating how fast you move towards disease because you have a normal blood test or a normal MRI. That is a complete load of crap. But that's for another day. So back to the point. So reality doesn't matter, your symptoms don't matter, it's just what's written on the magic blood test. So if the thyroid blood test says you're normal, then you're normal. And so, as I mentioned, finally, what was the doctor's answer when you said you still feel bad? I'm still tired. I still can't lose weight when I exercise. And why do I feel so tired after exercise? Well, I thought it was supposed to make me feel better. The doctor would say your blood test is fine. Your blood test is fine, so you can't be low in thyroid. And if you press the issue with the doctor, he would call you a dumb blonde and get out of your office. Get out. So the Dr. Debunk truth is this. If you're tired all the time, gaining weight, dieting doesn't work. You can't exercise because you're exhausted. Or if you can exercise because you push hard enough, it wipes you out. You're mentally fuzzy, your hair's falling out, constipated, and more symptoms, look them up. You are most likely low in thyroid. If you had 2 or more of what I just mentioned and walked into my office, I would put you on thyroid, and in 2 to 4 weeks, you would want to be my new boyfriend or girlfriend. Not that I'm looking for boyfriends or girlfriend, but because it would change you, it would fix you. So the point of this whole Dr. Debunk show is go and find a doctor that'll treat your symptoms, who's experienced in hormone replacement therapies. It's usually family practitioners. If you search around on the internet, you can find a doctor that says they do bioidentical hormone replacement therapies or hormone replacement therapies. So to finish, trust your body. Trust what you feel. If you don't like what doctors tell you, then read more, find out more. And if in the end the doctor won't deliver results, fire us. I tell patients that all the time. That's my standard saying. You come into my office, they hear about me, they tell me about their thyroid woes, and then I say, look, if in 4 to 6 weeks I don't fix you, fix your energy, fire me. Nobody ever fires me. None of us that do it this way ever get fired. And that's it, folks. This is another episode of the Dr. Debunk podcast show. And my name is Dr. Debunk, and I am the medical truth teller. Hi, everyone. It's the cold and flu season again. And this year's pretty nasty. Well, do you know what the best cold and flu remedy is? Well, it's a remedy that would be natural, strong, kills viruses, and has some science to show that it really works. Well, that's KSK Cold Spray. KSK Cold Spray is an all-natural, germicidal spray that eliminates cold and flu symptoms in 24 to 48 hours. I proved it in a study of 200 patients, and now we've probably had 700 people that have used the spray. Every year it's curing hundreds of my patients. So don't be miserable anymore. Go to kskcold.com, that's kskcold.com, and you'll love what you read. I'm Dr. Debunk, the medical truth teller.